Hi there everyone and welcome to the Rupa Subramanya Show. I'm Rupa Subramanya. Today I'm here to bring you the latest developments in a rapidly unfolding diplomatic saga that has sent shockwaves through the international community. It all began with the killing of Khalistani Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a case that has ignited tensions between the world's largest democracy, India, and Canada. Nijjar was a prominent Sikh Khalistani activist. He was gunned down by masked assailants on a bike in Surrey, British Columbia back in June. Now, Khalistan, for those of you who don't know what Khalistan means, it refers to a homeland for the Sikhs in the state of Punjab in India. They would like this homeland to separate from India. There was an active terrorist insurgency in the 1970s and 80s in India, which culminated in the assassination of then Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi by two of her Sikh bodyguards in 1984. The following year, an Air India jet was blown up in midair by a bomb planted by Khalistani extremists based in Canada. Everyone on board perished. Most of the victims were Canadians. It remains the worst act of terrorism in Canadian history. Now, on Monday, just a few days ago, on the opening day of Parliament, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau makes an explosive speech in which he alleges that agents working for the Indian government were responsible for the killing of Nijjar. Shortly afterwards, Foreign Minister Melanie Joly expelled a senior Indian diplomat. Now, the Justin Trudeau government is yet to provide any proof or evidence to back up these serious allegations. India's reaction has been very swift and uncompromising. In retaliation, the Indian government expelled a senior Canadian diplomat and dismissed the allegations as being absurd and motivated. On Tuesday, Canada's Department of Global Affairs issued a travel advisory to Canadians not to travel in India. On Wednesday, India retaliated with its own travel advisory, warning Indian students and visitors that their safety may be at risk in Canada. The Canada-India bilateral relationship, which I've been tracking for many years, was already on the brink, especially under the Trudeau government. It is now spiraling downward, ever downward, in a way never seen before. Now, at the time of recording this, my sources in India suggest that India's Ministry of External Affairs is getting ready to cancel the visas and overseas citizenship cards of Indo-Canadians whom they believe are linked to the Khalistan movement. If that happens, we can probably expect some retaliation from Canada, making it harder for Indians to study, work, or visit Canada. To make sense of all of this is my friend, Abhijit Iyer-Mitra. He is a security and foreign policy expert based in New Delhi and a senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, also based in New Delhi. He has commented quite extensively on this ongoing diplomatic saga between India and Canada, and it's my great pleasure to welcome to the Rupa Subramanya Show.
Thanks, Rupa. It's always great to catch up with you, and finally I get to see your face after years.
Yeah, no, it's a real pleasure. You look just as handsome as ever.
Thank you.
So let's get into the discussion, Abhi. So, what did you make of Justin Trudeau's explosive speech in Parliament in the House of Commons on the opening day of the fall session, accusing agents of India as being responsible for the targeted killing of Khalistani activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar?
Look, it just smacked of politics from day one, because this is not how friends behave with each other. We need to remember, when I say Khalistani, I'm just talking about the sort of elite subsection of the community, which have this almost vice-like feudal grip through terror of the community. I myself have suffered from this in Melbourne when I lived there. You know, being a Tamilian, I had to hide my Tamil identity in the last phases of the Sri Lankan Civil War, because, you know, there was a whole sort of elite capture of the Tamil diaspora out there, which used to extort money from the community. So what's happened is, I think Justin's given into that, and I'll tell you why. See, they were in a normal first world country, as I understand it, a country with the rule of law, the way things proceed is you have an investigation, you get to where the leads no longer are traceable within Canada, and then you approach with proof, you approach through intelligence sharing your friends and the country where you think the crime trail leads to. Usually the country where the crime trail leads to then collaborates with you, failing which you ask your friends to pressurize that country. In this case, it was the Five Eyes, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and the US. Now, it turns out that he has gone and spoken to the other Five Eyes. They have agreed to intervene, which is, basically act as a courier, nothing more, and say, New Delhi, intervene. Now, as I understand from my sources in New Delhi, they're like, intervene on what? Give us the leads. You don't have any hard intel to give us. You've given us no leads except to say, oh, you might be involved in it. Tell us who came, who are you accusing, which flight did he come with, and we'll trace him for you. None of that. Apparently, his entire tirade with Modi at the sidelines of the G20 summit was all generics, zero specifics. There was no intel sharing. There was nothing. Now, assume India and Canada do not have the level of strategic trust for intel sharing. We both have extremely robust intel sharing with the Americans, which is meant to be utilized precisely at a time like this when there is no mutual trust, but there is mutual trust with America to do that intel sharing, for that intel to have been given. But none has been shared. Every single thing I've heard in Delhi was generic requests to help, which India was not predisposed to do because India has anyway given very specific inputs about terrorism and terrorist activities being carried out. Now, I mention this very carefully because you have to interrogate me about this later when I say terrorist. I'm using the Indian government lingo. It's gotten drilled into my brain. It is actually incorrect. It is a whole load of criminal activity which the Indian government describes as terrorism. Because remember, there is no Khalistan movement at the moment. There is a whole lot of organized crime happening in Punjab in the name of Khalistan, but there is no Khalistani terrorism or secession happening at the moment. The Khalistan bit, the secession, the creation of a state is all kind of post facto hitched onto it to make crime seem respectable. Right. And that's my reading of the situation, that Justin Trudeau and his intelligence operatives probably understand this very well. They specifically did not want to share or even possibly have specifics to share with India. They did not want the reciprocal agreement of exporting crime gangs, which is what you see has happened with the so-called Khalistan movement in Canada, essentially a criminal enterprise, back to India in spite of very specific requests. And he thought that America, UK, Australia will all go along with it, which they did not. They just conveyed the message and that was it.
Yeah, so you make an interesting distinction between terrorism and criminal-related activities. I was under the impression that Hardeep Singh Nijjar was actually wanted on terror-related charges back in India. So is that still accurate?
Absolutely, it is. So yeah. Nijjar, we need to separate the Khalistan movement from Nijjar. Because remember, what happens is, you tell me one terror movement. I think True North and you study this a lot in Canada. You could tell me maybe if it's different in Canada. But there isn't a single terror movement we know that does not have intrinsic and deep links with organized crime. Because the fundraising for these movements has to be through extortion, drugs, basically systemic corruption or corrosion of the system where, systemic inefficiencies are employed to generate the profits, right? Now, mostly that's what it is. Because remember, if you're generating funds out there, where exactly is it going in India? Because you haven't seen a big bomb blast in Punjab or a major killing in Punjab in the last few years for terror-related activities. It goes in to settling criminal scores. So you even look at the bomb blast that Nijjar is wanted for. Nijjar is wanted for something very specific. That's a pure terror activity, but he's also wanted for a lot of associated criminal activity. The terror activity is something he went in 2013 and 14, I think, to Pakistan to meet this guy called Tara something. And the same Tara guy then he is wanted for because he's openly admitted to being behind the bomb blast that killed the Punjab Chief Minister, Beyant Singh, the last Congress Chief Minister, the last to last Congress Chief Minister of Punjab in 1996. He lived in Pakistan. Nijjar has gone to meet him. This Tara fellow has traveled to Thailand, which has an extradition treaty with India. Dirty old man, God knows what he got up to out there. And the Thais obviously caught him and extradited him to India. And from that point on, it seems this Nijjar guy has taken over. Now, you have, I think, if you've been on Twitter today, you've seen this video of this man wielding and firing AK-47s.
Mm-hmm.
Now, anybody who fires an AK-47 knows that this is not a precision rifle. This isn't for hunting caribou in the Great Canadian Wild. This is an extremely inaccurate weapon that fires lots of high-velocity bullets that's meant to lay down cover fire while Russian snipers then take out specific targets. This is a terror weapon. It is not a hunting weapon. And yet that is what he's seen firing. His whole range of ammunition that he's seen firing and training people on are much more suited to terror activities than they are even remotely linked to hunting in any form or way. So you have videos showing him training up people in guns. You have him with a clear, and by the way, this Tara Singh fellow is serving a life sentence at the moment for the killing of the Punjab Chief Minister. How do you not, under what part of Canadian criminal law is this fellow not a criminal or at least a person of interest to be interrogated? Given his own record of consistently lying, subverting the Canadian system, breaking law after law after law in Canada, and then being given citizenship on an unknown basis in 2015. How was he even given that citizenship?
Well, this is a question that I've asked myself on X or Twitter, whatever we're calling it today. But no, absolutely, Abhi. I mean, I'm an immigrant here myself, and I've had to work very hard to be here legally, unlike Mr. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and it is quite extraordinary. I mean, it certainly raises a lot of questions. He came to Canada under false pretext, under and then applied for legal residency, but he was denied because they didn't believe his story. He alleged that he claimed that he was in a prison in India and he was tortured by Indian police, and the immigration panel was like, no, I think this whole story sounds fabricated and we're denying your application. And then he marries a woman in British Columbia, and then they reject his application yet again, saying this is a marriage of convenience. And then I don't know what happened between then to the time that he got his citizenship in 2015. So it certainly raises a lot of questions. But, going back to this is, even if India, was behind this, or, let's just assume that India was behind this. There's a way of dealing with this sort of thing with an ally, through lots of talks, back-channel talks, intelligence sharing, whatever. The dramatic way in which Justin Trudeau went about doing this by making these allegations in the House of Commons, so he's protected by parliamentary privilege, right?
Yeah, not just parliamentary privilege. He's also, in a sense, absolved of responsibility if things turn out to be incorrect later on. Because you can't sue, as far as I think it's the same system in Canada as it is in India, where you can't be sued for anything you say on the floor of the House. So, there's no perjury, contempt, or whatever that applies on the floor of the House. See, the problem here is when Israel carries out targeted killings, which they do quite often, these things are handled in private. I think we all are old enough to remember what happened in the Dubai killings about 7-8 years back, where, the Israelis botched a killing, or rather they left a trail. The Dubai guys came after the Israelis, but they'd all fled. And these agents had fled to Poland and Germany because they were in Polish and German passports. They were arrested on smaller charges and they were extradited back to Israel, knowing full well that they will not get extradited ever to Dubai. Today, Dubai would probably even collaborate with Israel in these kind of things. Now, let's be clear. This, assuming the Indian government did this, this would not be an extrajudicial execution. It would be a quasi-judicial execution, which is something Canada agrees to and has legally endorsed. If you go to my timeline, I've tweeted out Justin Trudeau's tweet when the US carried out a targeted killing of Ayman al-Zawahiri, the Al-Qaeda #2. I think by that time it became the #1. I don't know what it was. What is a targeted killing? It's a very specific taking out. Now, if you go to the jurisprudence of targeted killing, which was the accepted jurisprudence is by Dr. Daniel Reisner, who was the he was the legal head of the Israel Defense Forces. He's also a professor at the ICT, the ICT college in Herzliya. I think he was there at one of the conferences that we did, you and I, in Israel. He laid down 5-6 criteria for what made it legal. The first was repeated use, which Canada has endorsed with America and its alliance participation in Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, and all of this. So Canada has agreed by repeated use. The second is public endorsement, which Justin Trudeau himself has over the killing of Ayman al-Zawahiri. The third has been if you are in a territory where there is no reasonable way of being able to extradite you, which Canada has proven over and over again that in spite of credible intelligence with proof provided to Canadian authorities, they refuse to extradite these people. And by the way, Justin Trudeau's father also did the same thing. That guy who was responsible for the bombing of Air India 182, Pierre Trudeau refused to extradite him, citing, do you know what was the excuse used, Rupa?
No, please tell us.
It was, you don't accept the Queen as head of government, as head of state. So you may be in the Commonwealth and we may have an extradition pact with you, but we will not, because the Queen is not your head of government. She's merely the head of the Commonwealth for you. Therefore, we're not going to extradite. And a year later, that fellow went on to bomb AI 182. Right? So what Canada does historically has been, they will cite, they accept the fact that everybody that India wants is actually required for crime or terror or something like that. Even yesterday, there was a political assassination. Again, it was a political crime, drugs-based assassination that happened of a Congress leader in Punjab, where a fellow sitting somewhere in Toronto has claimed responsibility for it because he's a big gang lord in Punjab while sitting in, somewhere in Ontario, not in Toronto. And there will be no extradition for it. Because what happens is every time it comes to the extradition phase, the Canadian government then cites their political opposition. So what happens here is you have this well-rehearsed routine where you carry out criminal drug-related shootings, you pass it off as political, then you make political statements against India and Canada, and you use the political shield to claim that this is a political extradition as opposed to a criminal extradition, and Canada always falls for these suckers. Right. Now, understand, I don't think the Canadian system is dumb. I think everybody knows exactly what's going on, but we all know that Justin Trudeau kind of uses this kind of identity politics and especially extremely radical, violent identity politics practitioners on the ground to extend his control over a certain system. So this is what happened. And this is what you see happening even today, where all Indian extradition requests are denied, citing political refusal or political dissidence as defense against actual physical crimes.
Interesting. That's
so anyway, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Daniel Reisner. The fourth criteria was it must not be used as punishment for a past crime. It has to be preemptive, not preventive. It has to be preemptive. There's a very subtle legal difference in legal concepts of war out there. Preemptive is, you know, this guy is going to kill me, therefore I kill him today. No. There has to be imminence. You need to know the gun is in the hand and he's coming to kill you, and then it becomes preemption. There's a very clear legal definition. So it has to be preempting an ongoing crime, etc., etc. So Daniel Reisner laid out these criteria. Canada accepts these criteria. They've been going with the flow. They've acquiesced in British and especially lots of American targeted killings. So I really don't know when he talks about sovereignty, what he's talking about exactly. I mean, how does he explain, how does he contrast his explanation with that tweet that he put out regarding Ayman al-Zawahiri?
Yeah, well, speaking of contradictions, so less than 24 hours after he makes these extraordinary allegations, there's a bit of a climb down, and I think you've commented on it as well. He said he didn't want to escalate things with India. He didn't want to antagonize India. It all sounds rather bizarre. What was your reading of it? How what are your sources on the ground in India saying about his climb down less than 24 hours later?
Apparently, it had a lot to do, if you noticed how your High Commissioner to Delhi, Cameron McKay, left the foreign ministry just within 4 minutes of entering it in an extremely nasty mood. He virtually assaulted the ANI reporter on his way out. So what ends up happening is, it turns out that the Indians told him in no uncertain way that they have lots of juice on Liberal Party leaders, Liberal Party Sikh leaders, especially your former Defense Minister Sajjan, having lots of dealings with criminal gangs in Punjab. Because you see, this is a very toxic environment. Crime is fungible. Punjab is one of the most backward states because, in 1991, when we had our big a moment of leap to industrialization and liberalization, Punjab was still in the throes of an insurgency and it never modernized. It's still been an extremely feudal agrarian state where 20% of the population essentially controls all the politics, all the land, everything. And a lot of these people who become so-called quote-unquote community leaders in Canada belong to that ruling class, and they have deep fingers in organized crime back in Punjab. In many ways, it's like the Pakistani army diaspora. Pakistanis are fundamentally good, decent people, but the army that controls the system is this sort of nexus of industrialists, landowners, the big landowners, and the army. All their kids don't fight in Kashmir. It's only the poor people's kids who die in Kashmir. All the rich ones are sitting somewhere in Toronto or Washington, D.C., or Boston or London, living the high life, using Pakistan to extort wealth. And that's what goes on out here. And apparently they have lots of juice on lots of liberal leaders, essentially involved in crime in Punjab.
So let's talk about the reaction of Canada's allies to these allegations. As you and I have noted on X, that the response has been very tepid. It's been lukewarm. There was one report in the Washington Post which said that the Americans didn't even want to get involved in this. What do you make of this? For me, the question I keep coming back to is, why on earth would you make these allegations? What were you hoping to accomplish by this? Did you actually think that the very same, your allies would just pick your side over India, given that India is a rising economic giant and an important counterweight to China as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned?
I honestly don't know what this man was thinking because, you tell me, Rupa, we all know you never go and do a public presentation till you have all your facts in hand and you know exactly what's coming at you. Before your PhD or your thesis defense, you always do several mock defenses before your friends and try to make it as brutal as possible. This guy neither does his homework properly, as we've discussed before. He also didn't do his groundwork. He's gone to all the allies. The allies have all given him lukewarm responses. Why did he need to go make it public, knowing full well that the allies aren't going to stand by him? None of the Five Eyes have stood by him. You compare this with, say, what the Five Eyes did for, the Kremlin's poisoning of Litvinenko, the FSB defector who then got poisoned by polonium-210. They all stood by and they coordinated the expulsion of Russian diplomats, etc., etc. None of them are standing by Canada and Trudeau. And it looks very bad for the Five Eyes agreement for an ally to be left out in the cold like that. But then what does it tell you? That Trudeau has gravely misread what the allies told him. I think this comes down to Melanie Joly, because she's clearly not been doing her job. I don't know what she has conveyed to these people and what those people, or has she misinterpreted it and misconveyed it back to Trudeau? Because none of them have stood. What have they said? They've said it's very serious. Any murder anywhere is an extremely serious crime. They have said, we have conveyed Canadian concerns to Delhi, which is what you do. The real intervention comes when people take sides and condemn. Have you seen anything remotely close to a condemnation or taking sides, other than saying, yeah, we received messages, it's serious, we passed the messages?
No, I haven't. It's all been just diplomatic speak and rather muted, actually. I shared a Department of Defense.
And the UK was the worst. The UK was the worst, because when they were asked about this, they said, oh, we're not halting a trade deal with India. They weren't even asked about the trade deal and they immediately switched to the trade deal with India.
No, and I just shared a tweet from the Department of Defense this morning. It's almost like they were trying to send a message. They were saying our priority is to strengthen ties with India, and because it's a key ally in our Indo-Pacific strategy. So, you look at the contrast, right, between Canada. Now, Canada has alienated both India and China. What is that? 2/5 of humanity, right there. And China, we know it's a totalitarian state. There are reasons to be very suspicious of China, given its role in the pandemic and that sort of thing. But India, I mean, a fellow democracy. It's not a tin pot dictatorship. Sure, it's flawed. I've been a critic of the current Indian government, and so it has its issues. But just to do this in this manner, just it's just mind-boggling. But I want to ask you about things that have happened in the last couple of days. Events have moved super fast in the last few days. There have been tit-for-tat diplomatic expulsions and travel advisories. Now, what are your sources saying in India? Like, I saw you sharing a tweet saying that there could be a possibility that the India's Ministry of External Affairs, which is the Canadian version of Global Affairs, is like Canada's Global Affairs. India's seriously considering canceling visas and overseas citizenship cards of Indo-Canadians. Is it all Indo-Canadians, or Indo-Canadians with ties to the Khalistan movement, or they suspect these individuals of having ties to the Khalistan movement? Can you clarify?
Look, my sources are telling me, and mind you, my sources are intelligence sources. Ultimately, there's a political decision that needs to be made, and the political masters will. I don't have sources out there right now. I've burnt all my bridges out there. But the list right now is they've gone through all the videos of a World Sikh organization and other related Khalistani organization protests and things like that. They've also made up very specifically, they've culled out a list within that of Sikh Liberal Party members who they suspect, whose social media accounts they've been scanning for Khalistani literature or pro-terrorism, as they view it, pro-terrorism, whatever. But most importantly, was something that went under the radar, which I have tweeted, is a list of about 24 Indian criminals, known murderers, extortionists, and rapists who are hiding out in Canada at the moment, which Canada, we don't know how they got into Canada. We know they're in Canada, and we don't know why the police in Canada isn't taking action against them. So that's been one part. The other part's been very specifically targeting Liberal Party members who are close to Sikh separatist politics. And the third has been anybody who appears on these WSO protest videos or any of these Khalistani protests. It is going to be culled down, I presume, because, different interest groups will come into play when the political decision is taken. But yes, you are going to apparently see quite a few cancellations of these sort of long-term visas. It's not exactly dual nationality, as you well know, but it's basically all the rights except the right to vote.
Okay. Yeah. No. Absolutely. So, final question for you, Abhi. What happens next? Where do we go from here? Do you think we've hit rock bottom, or is there worse to come in the worsening bilateral relationship? Do you think there's a serious possibility that this relationship can be repaired as long as Justin Trudeau is still Prime Minister of Canada?
Look, Rupa, I can tell you this very honestly. I've been speaking to a lot of people in government without exception. And, India is a third world country where no minister or bureaucrat ever agrees. If you've got 10 ministers in the room, you've got 24 opinions. This is one of the things they're very clear about, that this relationship is unsalvageable under Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau has to go. They are going to do everything to make life miserable for him from here. And there are many ways of doing this. There isn't a single big Canadian Sikh businessman who does not have business interests back in Canada, especially a lot in the Liberal Party. They're looking at lots of options, and Trudeau, as far as they're concerned, is persona non grata. Everything is fair game as far as he's concerned. They are going to be very measured. India is not one of those countries that goes berserk like China and starts using foul language and, crude threats. It's very measured, which is why I found the statement this morning, the travel advisories. And let's face it, nobody really, how many Canadians do modify their advice while traveling abroad based on a travel advisory? Does anybody take a travel advisory seriously? No, they don't.
It's the people who are have had their 7th booster shot and who are masked. Those guys pay attention to these things more than anything, but they're a small fringe minority.
We call them wankers in India. I don't know what you call them in Canada. In India, I think the French for it is le vainqueur, but I don't know. I think I'm just guessing that's what it is. We should conform with bilingual laws. So what happens is nobody takes these advisories seriously. And yet you look at the language in the advisory. Advisories are used for political signaling short of action. You don't want to take action, but you're signaling something. It says very clearly, politically condoned violence and hate speech, which means India is putting the blame for all the political action that's been happening against India out here, the displays of the putative, the desire to carry out terrorist activities, or like that Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, whatever he is saying, asking all Hindus to clear out from Canada. It has been laid at the door of Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, and Melanie Joly. It is unmistakably a laying of command responsibility. And and I know exactly what command responsibility means in criminal terms. It is laying the foundation for a future criminal prosecution of Canada's current leadership when they're out of power. I think that is the logical place where that particular statement leads to. We've still not reached the bottom. The bottom is many, many months to go. I think it will continue the hole will continue, keep getting deeper as long as Justin Trudeau is in power. And, Justin's kind of brought this on himself. If you saw his interaction with Xi Jinping, he's just pointlessly passive aggressive. You can be honest, you can be straightforward with somebody, and you can convey perfectly nasty messages with being perfectly polite without acting too smart by half. If you just go through that thing with Trudeau, He loves jargon. He loves hiding behind jargon and language, and he thinks this is peak diplomacy. It is not. It never has been. He's done this to himself. He's got nobody to blame. He thinks it's going to yield him a Hail Mary in the elections. Best of luck to him. But the Indian government's also made a mistake. You see, the Indian government, the big mistake we've made is going on calling this terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. We've been playing to Trudeau's narrative, claiming that this is political crimes, as opposed to what it actually is, which is a political patina on a druggy, gun culture, extortion, criminal underworld that operates across Punjab. Because, Punjab has the highest drug addiction rate of any state in India. It's a chronic problem. I would urge your viewers to go watch a lot of these Punjabi language movies on Netflix, translated into English and French, which show you the extent of the problem out there. India should be harping on the criminal aspects of this, because there is not one chap who is associated with Khalistan who is not in one way or another associated with the drug running, gun running, or extortion gang somewhere, or land extortion gang somewhere in Punjab.
Yeah, I know I said that was going to be my last question, but this question has been really bugging me, and this will be my last question, and I know you have to run to another meeting. So at the height of the two Michaels, as you're aware of the two Michaels, two Canadians who were imprisoned in a Chinese prison and were accused of being spies or whatnot. They languished in this prison cell for 2 years or more. And there was no tit-for-tat expulsion of diplomats as far as I'm aware. And, why is it that Justin Trudeau went after India in this way, but not after China?
A very good question. I really don't know. I guess it's to do with personal interest, that the Sikh members of his cabinet have business interests in India, but he doesn't. Most of his business interests would be kind of Klaus Schwab and WTO linked, and mostly tied into China and manufacturing. I don't know. Just the sheer levels of conflict of interest that this man has. That the island somewhere in the Bahamas or Caribbean or what have you, the amount of conflict of interest you see in this man is so enormous. Do I think they have compromat on him? No. But do I think that they have some kind of financial hold on him in terms of business interests? Yes, I think quite emphatically, yes.
Well, on that note, I'm going to have to leave it there, Abhi, but it was a real pleasure having you on my show, and thank you for sharing your insights with us, and I really hope to have you back soon.
Thank you so much, Rupa. It's always a pleasure talking to you.